He's had clients that say, I would rather die than be vulnerable. And that sort of sums it up, this idea that more attached we are to traditional masculine role models of being silent and self-reliant and stoic and strong.
Hey, I'm Ange.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting with a great story to share.
And we aim to find it.
The question is, can we rise to the challenge and strike gold?
I need my sugar.
I really enjoyed this podcast today, Ange, because Jon has just got a way of making life seem light, even though he's gone through some very traumatic experiences. But he's taken those experiences to bring life and hope into other people's lives.
Yeah, and he works in particular in the men's mental health space and suicide prevention. And this really is a topic that we don't like to discuss too much. It can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's definitely an important issue that's very relevant to our society right now. And so Jon offers some amazing keys on how to work through those issues in our life, or if we're caring for somebody that is perhaps struggling this way. So it's really great to hear from somebody that is a professional in that field and to get all the advice we need. So stay tuned.
I need my sugar.
So this is how it works. One of us knows our special guest and the other doesn't. And today, Beck is the one that is going to interview our special guest, Jon Morgan.
Yes, I am.
You are?
Yes.
So here's a little bit about Jon. He is the founder of Marcus Mission, which helps men with mental health and in particular suicide prevention.
Right.
Such an important thing actually in our world at the moment.
It is.
And there's a lot of emphasis on this. So this will be a great discussion. He is also a coach, but has worked in the corporate world for many years.
Yep.
And he loves to cook.
Oh, lovely.
So that's a bit about Jon. And let's dig for some gold.
Well, it sounds great.
So welcome in, Jon.
Come on in, Jon.
Woo!
Welcome to the show, Jon. Nice to have
Thank
you
you,
here.
Beck.
I'm really keen to hear all about your story because mental health is such a big issue these days. But first of all, I'm just going to ask you a quick question just to break the ice. If you were a pair of shoes, would you be a pair of runners, a pair of thongs, or a pair of stilts?
Pair of stilts, I like that too. That's really cool.
I don't even know where that came from. It just popped in my head.
Probably a pair of runners, I think, because I do exercise each morning, starting the day, owning the morning, starting the day with some exercise, climbing Mount Coolum or cycling or playing tennis, because I know that provides me with really good stability from a mental health point of view.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already impressed.
Yeah.
Climbing Mount Coolum, that's
It's
no
not-
mean feat.
It's not really a mountain, it's like a hill.
Well, it is, but the first time I did it, I nearly died.
Yeah, me too. For me, it's like Mount Kosciuszko. I've only done it once.
And it's not great, particularly when I started being lapped by, he must have been about 90 and he had a walking stick and he overtook me.
It's funny, isn't it? I saw someone the other day and she was just a bit shaky and I said, are you okay? And she said, yeah, it's always the fourth time that does it. And I'm going, oh my
wow.
goodness.
The fourth time in the morning.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
like 4 climbs in the morning. Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Wow. I was fine actually going up. It was coming down my knees kept giving way. Do you get
Yeah,
that?
because it's uneven ground and it's not easy, Mount
Yeah,
Coolum.
no.
I mean, I'd be able to do it better now because I've got fitter now, but the first time I did it, I was having heart palpitations and everything.
I'm really pleased to hear that. Now I feel better about when I'm
Good.
doing it.
There you go, Beck.
It's all paved with
starts
stone
somewhere.
now. It's really good. Yeah.
That's it. So do you live here on the coast?
I do,
You
yeah.
do. Have you always lived here?
No, we moved up when in 1998 we bought a house up here.
Yeah.
With a longer term goal of moving up, and then we went, let's move up now.
Yeah, right.
So we had a 4-year-old who's nearly 30.
Right, yes.
And we thought we'll get closer to the grandparents and
Yeah.
so it's been a great move.
So where did you come from?
We both came from Brisbane.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So-
a good move to go from Brisbane to the sunny coast.
Yeah, it's nice to get
That's
out
what
of
we did.
out of the bus. Oh, the same bit?
Yeah, but ours was a bit later, 2009 we came up. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's lovely up here, isn't it?
Oh, it's just divine. Yeah.
Except this year, because we do seem to have a considerable amount of rain. I keep banging
that's
on
right.
about this. But this is the whole reason I moved from England, was to avoid the rain. I just seem to have brought it with me. So
I just
Isn't that
focus on the
lovely?
growth of the plants.
Oh,
you know
well,
what I'm
that's
going,
true.
That's
They're,
right.
they're growing
And the
by the
water-
minute.
yeah,
The water tanks are full and
That's right.
overflowing.
Exactly, all that gratitude stuff.
And you know you're coming into winter, which is probably going to be a dry season. So I'm like, happy the tanks are full.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're on tank water?
We are, yes.
Nice.
On a bit of acreage.
Oh,
so,
that's great.
yeah,
Wonderful.
Love it. So tell me about your, so you founded the Marcus Mission.
Yep.
I'm glad it's written on your shirt because I forgot what it was called then.
That's fine.
So that's to do with men's mental health. Can you tell me a bit about how that came about?
Yeah, sure.
What brought you into that kind of work?
So I've been really lucky with role models. My dad particularly was really into community health
Yep.
and community work. So when I'd gone through a few big losses in the very early 90s.
Yeah.
A great mate died of leukemia very quickly. Had another mate that died by suicide, and I happened to be at the scene, and then had a divorce. So it propelled me into working for Lifeline. So I did the course, and I worked for Lifeline just doing their crisis stuff each week for 20 years. But in 2014, we had my nephew and godson, Marcus, living with us, and he died by suicide in our house. And ironically, I was doing a shift at Lifeline at the time. So my wife and I thought, well, what have we missed? You know, what's needed for a 23-year-old bloke? So we did a bit of research, and we found that, you know, it was the social support that was really missing. And we started, I approached an old client of mine, Wesley Mission Queensland at the time, who sort of partnered with me, and we set up a place where we could educate, go upstream, find guys that were challenged but not critically suicidal at the time, so sort of subacute, if you like, who'd gone through relationship bust-ups, custody issues, financial issues, addiction issues, conflict, family, you know, difficulties, and we thought we could design some workshops, because that's kind of my thing corporately, facilitating workshops. We could design some workshops that might help them with some tools, and also start a mentoring program and do some general suicide prevention work in the community.
Yeah,
So that's kind of the three peers of the program.
So if we go back a little bit, so in the 90s, you said that a mate of yours died of leukemia, another one committed suicide. You went through a divorce. So these are issues that you would have had to have found mental strength to go through. And obviously you did, and you found some keys there and some skills that helped you to get through some traumatic experiences, and then went on to work for Lifeline. So what were those things that got you through those moments?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Beck. I mean, I did what most blokes do when we're faced with difficulties, and that is run and hide.
Yeah.
So I smoked weed, drank a lot, tried to occupy myself with other stuff for a little while. But fortunately, I've got a really good social support, you know, in terms of sisters, in terms of parents at the time, in terms of best mates, had really, really good support. So I just made the decision, righto, let's turn this into something that's where I can support other people and be there for them while they're in that time of sort of crisis. So I guess it's, and I come from a very optimistic, resilient sort of family. Just people that get on with the job. But I was like most guys, as Brene Brown said, you know, weakness is shame in men, and I was feeling a lot of shame. You know, a loss of identity as a husband and you know, as a friend, and a lot of those loss factors. So it took a while, but then sort of mid-90s, I went, righto, what can we do here? And Lifeline it's kind of therapeutic. You find a lot of messed up people wanting to be crisis supporters actually doing the Lifeline course because you're dealing with your own crap, really.
Yeah, because the courses would help you first and then you can help others.
Absolutely.
And I guess having been through things, you have a greater understanding of what people are going through because you would have more empathy. You've been through it yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. And the lived experience is really good. A lot of our mentors, all of our mentors that do great works by just spending some time with other fellas each week or each fortnight, they've all had lived experience. So we've got, people with addiction and bust-ups and all sorts of issues that really do have a sort of an empathy from that lived experience. And for me too, it was really helpful because I think I was pretty naive. I had a pretty good life, pretty easy life until sort of 1990 where it sort of hit the fan a bit.
And I guess at first you don't know how to deal with that, but like you said, you had sisters, you had family around you. Obviously they were willing to just sit and listen, talk with you, and that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the heart of it. I mean, that social connection is really important, and one of the things that we always have with our mentors when we do the training with them, which is ongoing, is we don't want you to fix or problem solve or rescue. We want you to listen and reflect and be there for other people and just hear their story and be the sort of the support net around them. It's really important.
Isn't that interesting? Because a lot of people want to fix people, don't they? But it's actually not about fixing people.
Exactly.
And I guess the fixing comes in just listening.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's actually a bit insulting, isn't it, when you're going through strife or whatever and people bring their expertise in and you should do this or you should do that. So one of our golden rules is, no fixing, no problem solving, just being there, just being able to reflect, but also help them to help blokes to have a greater understanding of the fear and the hang-ups and the issues that they're experiencing, which is sometimes, in my experience, is difficult to see yourself.
Yeah. And because you have to also feel like your pain is understood to begin with, don't you?
Exactly.
So you have to be on that same level that, okay, first of all, they understand the pain I'm feeling. Yeah. And then they're going to walk through with you, aren't they?
Precisely. That's a great way of putting it. Just demonstrating that you understand what's happening in their heart more than their head.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's not the issue, it's the feelings and the suffering and the trauma that goes with it. That's the difficult bit.
How hard is it, though, for someone that has depression to want to engage in community? Because you talk about community really is kind of key to someone's mental health and then recovering.
Yeah.
But I imagine taking that initial step to actually put yourself in a social space is actually quite a leap for some people. Is that right? And
absolutely.
And so how would somebody, put themselves in that position if they've got depression?
It's a really good question, actually, that when I first started, so when we started the program 6 years ago, I was like the salesperson trying to convert every prospect, any bloke's name that I heard, I'd be, come along, it's really good, you'll see. But one thing that I didn't really truly understand was that, there's got to be a readiness on behalf of the bloke. There's got to be a readiness to do something differently and to get outside themselves and actually have that sense of discomfort and, more importantly, to be vulnerable. And, blokes aren't really good at being vulnerable most of the time. So one of the things we found was that the design was really important. So, for instance, on the coast, we're at the Marcoola Surf Club out the back, where you hear the waves, you've got a bit of sand under your feet, and whilst you're in a covered area, it's really casual and it's really informal. And the same with the mentoring. I encourage the mentors to go for a walk or kick a footy or go for a surf, but not to sit and eyeballing guys across the table, because they don't flourish in that environment. And the other thing I'd sort of say, and I was just speaking to one just then before I came in, I said, mate, a couple of things that you got to understand. It is completely non-judgmental, and these are all guys with big hearts. And we have, excuse the expression, a no dickheads rule, so that if you got a big ego or you want to talk yourself up, we really don't want you in the program. And so we invite people to come in and just feel safe, if you like, in terms of speaking their truth and sharing their stuff. And sometimes you'll get fellas that get really sad, and we'll be talking about relationship stuff and conflict, and they'll get really sad. And you'll see what's really quite beautiful about the program is you'll see other guys that just get behind them, give them a big hug and go, that's good, mate. Let it all out. That's what you need to do. So it's kind of changing that narrative a little bit, that vulnerability is weakness, and trying to talk about that being courage, and also the reset point where you can actually take a bit more control of your life perhaps and navigate a better future.
Yeah. And it's finding that safe space for them, isn't it, where they are accepted and they can be vulnerable and not feel foolish for their vulnerability. And it's also, you often hear that men talk best when they're doing something. So that sounds like where you come in too. So you were telling me that you do the morning activities. So does that extend beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, for our guys particularly, one of the things we were trying to do is, coming back to your question, Ange, is to have a few entry points. So rather than just rocking up at a workshop and going, oh, gee, there's all these guys here, and feeling a bit intimidated, we will encourage other people to pick them up and bring them along. But the other thing we do is say, come for a walk. You know, let's just meet mid-month at the surf club. Come for a walk and have a chat, and we'll walk on the beach at Marcoola and have a bit of a chat. And if they kind of like the vibe, if you like, they'll hopefully come along to the workshop. And it is a really important part of it, because one of the things we found, which was really profound when we were doing the initial research, was that shoulder to shoulder is vital for men. So it's almost like when you go camping and you're sitting around a campfire and everybody's looking into the fire and the conversation just flourishes. It's that same principle. It's like the conversation becomes a bit incidental when you're feeling relaxed and safe and okay.
Because there's a fairly high percentage of suicides in men above suicides in women, isn't there?
76% of all suicides are men. Women attempt far more than men, but we're competitive. We like to be successful.
So women are failing.
Well,
it's a good thing to fail at.
It's a great thing to fail at, actually. But I think, one of the things that I see sometimes is the second chance stuff, where I've got one at the moment that had an attempt a while ago, and beautiful support from kids and his partner. And she just said, are you ready? Are you prepared to do something about this? So he's had the courage to come to Marcus Mission now. And I think that's the hard part. You can't drag them kicking and screaming. And so I have these men where, it's perfect circumstances for them to come in, but they're going, oh, it's too far. And I go, you're at Maroochydore. We can pick you up. It's not far. But it's, not putting excuses in the way, trying to actually push yourself to open up and think of another path.
Yeah, that's right. And we've had a few men in on our show who have been at the point of suicide, and their stories of what life was like once they pushed past that are quite extraordinary. And so there's that hope, isn't there? It's like if you can get people past that moment, there's so much more goodness and life to be had.
Exactly.
And it's trying to get people to see beyond the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for us, one of the things we learnt with Marcus is that if it's really difficult if you get too far down the track. So if you're chronically depressed and you've been depressed for a while and you feel the burden, it's really difficult, and you've gone through. So, catching people when they're struggling initially, not so much when they've been going for years and years, because it's really hard to pull people out of that.
I've heard depression is like a hole that gets deeper.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I have to say I've experienced a lot of grief, but I've never really experienced depression, so I can't speak from a lived experience point of view. But I do think it's really important to be able to, as you quite rightly said, Beck, this idea of seeing that beyond this, there's hope. Sometimes you've got to go from cold, to kind of lukewarm and uncomfortable before you can get to the hot side. And I think, and what I mean by that is before you can reinvent your life. But I do think it takes a lot of courage to do it, because this idea of being able to show that, you are weak and you're really struggling, and to receive support is actually a bit difficult at times.
Do you think that's the issue, that our society, that we think that, to be vulnerable and to air our issues is considered weak? Is that where we're going wrong? Because these stats are rising, aren't they? Even though we've got more awareness around mental health, for men, the stats continue to rise. So what, as a society, are we doing? What culture have we created that isn't healthy for men?
So a really good comment. I think, if we think about culture generally, we've created a culture for men and women where, it's a lot about image, and social media puts a lot of pressure on people and so forth. But I think for men, there's a guy that I've worked with who's a psych and also part of the Movember Foundation. His name's Dr. Zach Ziedler, and he does great work in this space. And he's had clients that say, I would rather die than be vulnerable. And that sort of sums it up, this idea that more attached we are to traditional masculine role models of being silent and self-reliant and stoic and strong. That's a great role model for part of our life. Like sometimes anybody, male, female, you've got to be able to step up and do some things. But I loved what he said once, where he said, that's fine for certain circumstances, but as long as you've got the flexibility to sit on the couch with your daughter, watch a Disney movie and quietly sob there and feel okay with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good comment about being able to be in touch with your emotions. It's great to be strong and so forth, but if that's our only role model, and we know that men are tough and, we're self-reliant, we need to figure out stuff with self, and we can't get help, and we can't feel sad, and we can't feel vulnerable, because I think, generally speaking, I know this is very stereotypical, but they often say that, women really struggle to be angry because it's just not seen to be part of the gender, and men really struggle to be sad and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's this notion about making those things a bit more acceptable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you were saying that you work in the corporate world as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Sort of our life is, or my life, I should say, has been just a very intuitive one, where you don't think too much, you just do. It's a little like buying up the coast and going, let's move, let's do it. Just that idea. And it was the same for me. I was working from about 93 to 96. I was working for the Australian Institute of Management as a facilitator, and it was brilliant, great learning the ropes. But I just woke up one night and said, I'm gonna resign today. And so I walked in and saw the CEO, said, oh, Peter, I'm resigning. And he laughed. And I said, but I'd like to work with some of your clients still if I could. And so that was in May 1996. And I didn't have a plan. But since then I've been running a leadership and team development company and working with, you end up falling into sectors. Even though I've worked with some construction companies and blue collar, a lot of my stuff in the last 15 years has been universities, schools, care organisations, that sort of stuff. Developing great relationships with clients. Whereas now, I guess I just work with people I really like, because more than 50% of my time is Marcus Mission, so I don't have the luxury of working too hard commercially, and I also think I'm getting lazy. I prefer working with the vulnerable blokes, than...
I'm just wondering, if you've got this leap before you think mentality, how many times have you regretted your decisions?
Yeah, well, I've regretted a few. I've regretted the times where I've regretted it, and have been where I've gone, I'm really emotionally charged, and I've made a decision. But when the heart rate is normal,
Here's a good idea. I might just resign today.
Yeah. But also, I think in some ways, it's about, and I love that about my mum particularly. She's a real go-getter, and she never, she just just jump into it, don't overthink it. And
Yeah.
I quite like that idea that if something intuitively makes sense to you, and I'm sure you're both the same,
Yeah.
just do it, give it a go.
So tell us a little bit about your family and your growing up years. Did you have a lot of siblings?
I've got 2 older sisters,
Yes.
Marcus's mum, Monty, and sister Shell.
Yeah.
And we lived in Brisbane. Mum and Dad, had an old pineapple farm, 2.5 acres of shale in 1958, I think, out of Brookfield, which
Yeah.
became a bit of a kind of upmarket area. But it was a great childhood.
Yeah,
It was fun,
You sound like the kind of child that would always find yourself doing something that is probably pushing the boundaries, and you've got yourself in trouble somehow. I thought, I wish I hadn't done that.
I'm going to make myself a tractor.
Yeah.
Well, I think I mean, it was a great childhood and it was really nice. And my dad was actually a scientist and a great science teacher and great human being generally. But he, and I was like the third bottom physics student in my year at school. So I
That
was
sounds
hopeless.
like a trophy.
I was
the third bottom physics student.
yeah, I got the bronze. But one of the things that I loved about him is he didn't want us to be too comfortable. So he would take our family overseas every 10 years for a year to live.
Right.
So, we lived in Canada when I was super young. We lived in Scotland when I was like 14 or 15, and then we got in the back of a really old car and drove around Europe for 5 months. So I've had this amazing sort of adventures, and we've carried those adventures with our kids too. We thought it would finish when they're adults, but we all travel together a lot actually.
Oh, that's great.
Which is really nice.
Sounds like that mentality that we talked about earlier, leap before you think. That it seems as if that stemmed from your childhood. Let's just let's just go live in Scotland for a year.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like fly by the seat of your pants kind of. Yeah, but I like it.
Yeah.
It's given you an exciting, adventurous life.
Yeah, very much. And also, I think just opened my eyes to the world. I remember I was 14 and we were staying in this little pension or backpackers or whatever, and I said to Mum and Dad, I'm going to Le Louvre today and I want to see it. And I remember getting kicked out by the guards half an hour after closing time because I just wanted to see it all.
Yeah.
And then it was dark and I crossed the wrong bridge and I got lost, and it took me 3 hours as a 14-year-old to get back to the backpackers or whatever.
Wow.
You probably loved every minute
Mum
of
and
it.
Dad were having kittens, so I think it was that idea of it'll work out, it's okay, not too much fuss, not too much cotton wooling.
Yeah, right. And you have a love of cooking.
I do. I
Yes,
really
tell us
like
about
cooking.
that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not particularly good at it, but I really like being in the kitchen and I like cooking.
Yeah.
So for the guys at Marcus Mission, because we operate between Gold Coast and Bundy, I cook breakfast for 30 guys each month and then cook them lunch and so forth. And when it comes to Christmas, it's when we really pull out all stops and, have like 6 slow cookers. Yeah, they're with curries and, butter chicken and lasagnas and all of that sort of stuff. And I guess it comes from childhood. Mum was a good cook, and she wasn't particularly loving via words, but she would cook for you. So even when we had a child, she'd bring up 20 meals for you, put it in the freezer.
Yeah.
It was a real practical aspect of love, if you like.
Yeah.
Service.
Well, cooking and food is such a great way to make people relax and talk. So it is a tool for you, even in what you're doing in the mental health world. And is that something you incorporate in kind of the mental health rehabilitation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one of the things that one of our guys that came on board and was with us for 3 years and did really well, I guess the goal for us is to empower men to get back into the community and be a bit independent, But a lot of them love to still hang around with the program, which is great. But this particular guy loved cooking, and I think for him it was a real therapy. So, there's a couple of guys like him that we'd cook with, and it'd be really fun. But one of the things we found during COVID, we were doing everything on Zoom. So we were doing all of our workshops on Zoom almost fortnightly. And then when we came back, I said to our guy at the time who was managing the program, Glenn, I said, I think I'm going to put on a breakfast, and I think I'm going to start an hour early before the workshop so people can come in. And it was just so, you could just see the engagement. And I went, right, this is the model. We need to have the breakfast served at 8 so people can come in. And because I think one of the things we underestimated was the sense of connection and belonging and sense of mateship. That was a sort of a spin-off. It wasn't part of the educational workshops. It wasn't part of the mentoring. But there's this there's a really lovely part of the program where guys just love to see each other and have a chat, and they can talk about anything.
It's interesting you say about connection, because during COVID there was a spike in suicides because of the disconnect between people, and you were running your foundation through that time. Did you notice specifically that time of having to, I guess, extend yourself further? How did you make that work during lockdowns? Yeah,
it's a really good question. I was kind of lucky in a way, and I joke about it because I lost 2 years of commercial work in a week, so I had like 40 calls from all my clients going, it's all done, we're done and dusted for the year. So I had this space. So I ended up writing another sort of book. I'd written one 20 years ago or whatever, but I put together another one. And the other thing is I really liked the Zoom. I thought it was fun. So we would just put on tons of workshops for guys. And at that stage we had 10 areas, some in the country. So I think it was a really good connection point for some of the fellas to be able to know that they can still have a conversation even though we couldn't physically get together. And I loved it. I was thinking, how good is this? You finish your workshop and you're on the veranda. Normally I'm driving back from, Brisbane or Lismore or somewhere from a workshop, and I'm having a cup of tea on the veranda at 3 p.m. It's pretty cool.
I did actually hear during that time some people that had chronic depression actually thrived during COVID because they didn't have those social anxiety or those expectations that they've got to connect, that they are doing things on Zoom. And I think there's that sense of you're secure in your own little private space, and perhaps you can open up and be a little bit more vulnerable online than you can on one-to-one. And so I think for some people, they actually thrived in that environment. Do you think that was true?
Yeah, well, I definitely think it gave some people a bit of a reset button, you know, just that idea about, wow, okay, what am I going to do now? And I know for me, I was really happy because at the end of that I went, I'm over this, because I think I'd driven like 1.1 million kilometres in the first 20 years, just driving to venues to do workshops wherever they were. So I'm
impressed that you've actually kept a count.
Well, a bit of a numbers person. I think my mum was a maths teacher. It's funny when I'm struggling up the mountain, I go, okay, 323, 324. Wow. So I think for me, it just helps me. But yeah, I must admit at the end of that, I went, oh, I love staying around the coast. I don't want to drive so much. I'm going to be a bit choosy with the sort of work I do. And but I think for a lot of people, just that idea of coming into the cocoon, maybe, I don't know. And as long as you've got enough social contact and support, it can be a nice thing just to be able to be on the veranda, listen to the birds. And let's face it, at the coast, we had it so easy here. You could still go and surf or go to the beach or whatever. Sure, you had to occasionally wear a mask or whatever, but it was pretty easy,
we
wasn't
live
it?
in a good space for lockdowns.
It wasn't really a lockdown. It was
I'm intrigued, though, about your own mental health, because you've had some significant events in your life that could be a trigger for mental health. And I know you said you've never really had depression, but now you're around people that the weight of their life could probably weigh on you. How do you handle your own mental health around others?
It's a good question. A couple of things I think about. I think boundaries are important. So one of the things that we try and do, my wife works often with vulnerable women who had a DV or addiction or whatever, and part of our rule was, okay, when we're working with people, we're not bringing people into our house. We'll go out and have a coffee, go out and have a walk, but that's our little sacred sort of area. So we try and stick by that. And also, I remember getting a bit burnt out a couple of years ago, and I remember hanging up on our program coordinator and going, oh, I'm feeling really frustrated here.
Yeah.
And I think I was overreaching, and I think that was a bit late to realise, oh, okay, stop trying to do everything for all people. And so last year, interestingly enough, and I, by the way, I think the part of the preventative strategies are things like exercise, meditation, a bit of prayer, a bit of reading, time with family, time out, just doing dumb things like watching Netflix, not trying to do everything for everyone. And I remember I did the Camino last year with the walk, the Pilgrim's Walk across Spain with my best mate. And there's Sounded of Pharaoh, I think there's this cross, and the pilgrims used to take a little pebble and they used to place the pebble under the cross. And it was the notion of, okay, I'm going to think about a burden that I have and I put it under the cross and let go of it. And that was really my burden, was not trying to be all things to all people and always say yes to stuff. And even socially, like if people say, I'd really like you to come to this or whatever, and I'll go, sorry, can't do it. Washing my hair that night. I know it doesn't take so long when you're bald, but
not entirely.
But it's this idea of just letting go of that. And I think the other part of that, which one of our mentors taught me, a guy called John Pearson, who's pretty extraordinary in this space, he talks about when you're feeling too much for the other person, you kind of lost your soul, you've fused with them. So your job is to be there to support them, but you can't have the weight of their problems on your shoulders. And I guess that's the difficult part of a suicide prevention program. Is, I think we've lost one man in 6 years, but we will sometimes lose people, and we can't take the responsibility on, because I know what it was like for my family, that guilt and the shame and all of that about, we could have done more and we should have done more and so forth. So you've got to have faith in the process of engaging with people, but know that they've got to do the heavy lifting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have got to kind of do the work. And I think that's important for me. And I also think your own personal self-care, preventative strategies are really important. Lots of time out, lots of, breaks or exercise or good food even, not trying to eat crap food, because some of our guys we're meant to be non-judgmental, but sometimes I see fellas that, they're not doing themselves any favours with exercise or the crap they eat and so forth, and then they're struggling with mental health, and I'm thinking, there's a correlation here,
Yeah, some better lifestyle choices.
But again, that's that's
I just
their
think
life, not mine.
exercise is such a key. Like just getting out, getting the fresh air. I know when I go out and I walk and run, and I feel so much better. Like it's the push to try and get out is always hard, because you think, I've got to get out of bed early, or the discipline required to do it.
Yeah.
But within 5 minutes of being out, I'm so glad I'm out, and it
Exactly.
helps you really set you up for your day and changes your perspective.
Releases the endorphins.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I think the other thing I saw the other day, which is really interesting, is that your eye movement when you're walking is side to side without you knowing it. So, your amygdala and so forth is you're getting out of that, and you're getting into this peripheral vision. So it's really, you're kind of letting go of some of the worry and the fear and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got a daughter, my youngest is in Melbourne, and she's got chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the things she's really good at is just going for a walk and putting her feet in the grass and sort of connecting with nature a bit, and knowing it's not going to solve everything, but it's certainly a good step.
Yeah, and they're things that everybody can do. It's
Exactly.
accessible to all of us. So
Exactly.
yeah, and the difference that simple thing just can make is quite impacting.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's hard when you're depressed. It's kind of counterintuitive, because you just want to crawl under the doona and not get up, and I absolutely appreciate that. But I think it's also the idea of just focus on the process, what's the process of engaging with people, what's the process of exercising or feeding yourself well, and making sure you're doing the things that will help in the longer term as well.
So Marcus is obviously the centre of what's instigated Marcus Mission. How did your family cope with that whole situation, and have they come around you to do this mission?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It was probably the most difficult time in my life, and a different kind of grief and a different kind of loss. So when I lost my friend, that I literally was experiencing some of the Kubler-Ross stuff of denial and resistance and anger and exploration and not knowing what was happening for me. And the police counsellor that came out to talk to me said, this is the stuff that you might be experiencing. But that's a very personal experience. When you've got a family and they're all involved in a scene like that, particularly someone that's so close, so almost an elder brother to my daughter and a brother to an older brother to our son, it's just heartbreaking to watch them being affected by it. So they both needed some counselling. Certain members of the family had really bad PTSD as a result of it and had to work through that, which is just, as a parent, as a protector, oh my goodness, it is so tough. But it's also, I'm very close to my elder sister, like she's one of the most beautiful people in the world. So to hear her primal screams when she was staying with us, having lost Marcus, I can never forget it. It was heartbreaking. But I have to say, she is extraordinary. She does the social media of Marcus Mission. She's totally our biggest supporter. She promotes it widely. And I think, like me, it's finding meaning in loss. And for her, she said to me a few times, it was such a critical part of her recovery, because you're always going to have scar tissue, and you're going to have some days or some moments where you gasp because you just revisit that. But at the same time, it's thinking about taking something good out of a shocking, traumatic situation. And I think, I think in some ways it does make you a better person or have a greater empathy or compassion when you've experienced some of that stuff. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, though.
No.
We hear it so often that there aren't any signs, are there? And it just happens so suddenly. So suicide prevention, then obviously I think that we're always in prevention. So what do we need to do in our everyday life for the men, the people in our life, whether we think they're depressed or not, to prevent suicide? Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely a lottery, and the statistics prove that. You can't predict who it's going to happen to. And it certainly was the case with us. We'd ask the questions, but people that have severe ideation are great at holding up a mask and pretending that they're okay. And in fact, they often say that sometimes people are content once they've made that decision, which is kind of a bit scary, isn't it? But I think for me, it comes back to what you were saying earlier, Beck. If we're talking to people and we can be supportive for all those people that are part of our community, whether they're neighbours or whether they're friends or colleagues or whatever, and we can genuinely take time to connect and listen to them, I think that is hugely important. And going beyond the words. So, one of my favourite expressions, which comes from an aged care manager actually, is don't just hear the words, listen to the music. Listen to what's really happening for the person. So I'll speak to some fellas and, because I phone all the guys during the month between workshops and stuff, and I go, how are you? And they go, I'm okay. And you go, oh, that doesn't sound so good. Tell me about okay. What's happening? But digging into that, and I guess that's where the crisis counselling was helpful, because you'd sort of try and dig under it and say, what's happened this month? What's been good? What's not been so good? And trying to have a real conversation rather than, yeah, I'm good, I'm okay, yeah, I'm fine. I think that's the hard part because we pretend. We put on a mask, don't we?
It's interesting you say about people wear a mask because I remember, like just as a major example in the world was the actor Robin Williams, and he was a comedian, and then he committed suicide, and I was like, how on earth did that happen? He was so funny. So you think funny is joy, but often people who are not everyone, but sometimes that is a symptom of
the disguise,
covering over what's really going on underneath.
And absolutely. And I think, we unfortunately, we will lose people, and sometimes it's shocking like it was in Marcus's case. But I think we do need to be able to give people as much support as we can and encourage them to seek help as well, to sort of encourage them to be vulnerable and to open up. So, we don't try and ever replace clinical support. We're a supplement to it. So, being able to sit with a counsellor or a psych and unpack the difficulties. If medication's required, take it. That they're the sort of things that are important. It's got to be a bit of a holistic approach. But certainly one of the things that we need is people that we can completely trust with our vulnerability.
Have you had any standout, standout
recovery of people that have made
cases.
It through.
I mean, I used to always say that when I was doing some work for Lifeline, it's such a privilege to go into people's homes and to be with them when they're struggling. But for me, with Marcus Mission, the absolute joy and the stuff that we really, for me, which is just wonderful, is seeing fellas that come into the program and they're really tentative and they're really struggling, and seeing them find a voice and seeing them find their feet. So we've got lots of people that have been mentored or have been part of the group where you see them flourish. And I do remember we had a reference group meeting, and there was 5 of them that just stayed on the end of that at one stage, and they said we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Marcus Mission. We wouldn't be on the earth. Amazing. And like that blows your mind, doesn't it? To think, wow, just a small thing that can actually help people feel enough supported to be able to do some of the healing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We're going to go to gold in a minute. Rebecca will reveal the gold. But before we do, I've got 2 questions. The first one is, if someone is in that position right now, and maybe they're listening to this podcast and they are considering their life. Yeah. What advice would you give them right now as maybe just a small first step to bring them out of that?
It's a great comment. The first thing I would say is, please remind yourself at this moment that the most courageous thing you can ever do in your life is to reach out. So if, for me, whether that's picking up the phone, talking anonymously to Lifeline, or whether that's seeking professional help or counsellors, just to unburden yourself. Because when you're carrying around that weight and it's all on your own shoulders, it's such a burden. So that idea of, just reaching out, but also coming back to something you said, which is in my opinion, gold too, Beck, which is that idea that when you get past that, life can be so good. There can be so much hope. As long as we're prepared to do the healing, which is really uncomfortable, we can get past that.
And what's the number for Lifeline?
131114.
Yeah.
From memory, I haven't been there for a while.
And the second question is, if someone is caring or supporting somebody that's in that position, what's the best thing that they can do?
Yeah, well, I'd like them to give me a call and have a chat, because I think one of the beautiful things is when you get referrals from, family members or friends or whatever, and saying this person's, feeling a bit vulnerable. And if they can possibly bring them to a workshop, or if they can help them, take them to the appointment. That's something that we had to do with family members, literally take them to the appointment and get them talking, because once we can open that door, it's terribly therapeutic, but really hard, just giving them that little gentle loving nudge, if you like.
And they can find you. Have you got website?
Yeah, so there's, if you Google about Marcus Mission, you'll see that. You'll see a bit of our blurb, if you like, and also you can give me a call on 0419 774 194 anytime, and happy to have a chat to anybody.
Beautiful.
about themselves or others.
Okay. Beck, over to you.
Some gold.
Let's see
There's
what the
lots of
gold
gold
is.
in you, John. But I see you as I don't see you as a little boy now, but when you were a little boy, I could imagine that you're a happy-go-lucky little boy who saw everything as being possible, and you had a great can-do attitude, right? And then with your family just saying, we're going to go and live here for you, we're going to live here for you. Anything is possible. You can just do that. And then you were confronted with some traumatic experiences that opened your awareness to some very heavy issues in society, but hit you personally. And it's that personality that you have, that resilience that was able to pull you through that and then address it and say, let's deal with this. Let's find something that can pull other people out of that hole or assist people so that they don't go through what's happened. But if you had crashed and burned during the time of going through that trauma, you wouldn't have been able to. So it's this personality that's grown from childhood that's given you this can-do attitude. Nothing's impossible. Let's do something, make it better. That has created and taken on this Marcus mission to what it is today, and continuing to support and inspire people to keep living. So I commend you on that, because that is a wonderful way to spend your life, and I see that as your true life purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very fulfilling, I have to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with
Thanks
us
very
today,
much,
John.
Ange. Thanks,
It's
Beck.
a pleasure to hear your story.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks for being so great as interviewers.
So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a poem. Honey, you're my sugar.